There are betrayals that don't explode with noise. They bleed quietly, destroying a family piece by piece. In that tragedy, a husband used a winning lottery ticket as his escape, a ticket to abandon every promise and vow he ever made. And a wife turned her pain into the sharpest weapon of all, the truth. This is a story of money, betrayal, and the strength of a woman who refused to stay silent. And when justice finally speaks, the loudest sound won't be revenge, but the soft, steady exhale of peace.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Grace. I'm 38 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I once believed that if there was enough love, marriage would weather every storm. Now I know. It doesn't break with a single explosion, but frays gradually like the edge of an old handkerchief, one thread a day, until there's nothing left to hold on to. 10 years with Ethan were 10 years of learning to count loose change and listen to the rain in the same rhythm. We began with a cheap silver ring, an apartment looking out over a parking lot, burnt-edged pancakes for breakfast, and nights huddled under a frayed blanket watching black and white films. Back then, I believed just smiling at each other was enough. I believed so much I even thought the acrid smoke in the kitchen was the smell of happiness. But tonight, the kitchen is damp and cold. The yellow bulb sways. The countertop is speckled with coffee stains. In front of me is a stack of bills with folded corners like paper knives. Ethan sits opposite, head bowed over his phone. A thin blue light sweeps across his cheek, leaving a strange shadow. I say softly, "Ethan, the electricity bill is due. I've asked for extensions many times. They said it has to be paid this week." "I know. I'll take care of it." He doesn't look up. 3 words that once reassured me are now as empty as a glass dried at the bottom. His phone vibrates. For a moment, I catch the English words, "Can't wait to see you again." He swipes quickly, deletes it, the screen going dark with a small, sharp click, as crisp as a coffin lid. I take a deep breath, soothing myself. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it's work. Belief is lighter than suspicion. I joke to ease things. "How about I buy a lottery ticket tomorrow? Maybe from above, we'll get a little luck." He smiles, thin as paper. "Yeah, keep dreaming, Grace." Then he puts the plate in the sink without turning on the water and goes straight upstairs. The door closes. The faint turn of the latch sounds like a picture frame falling off the wall. I sit still, listening to the clock tick like drops of water falling onto stone. Old film clips appear in my head, his hand around my shoulder in the rain, a poor but warm wedding day. His promise, "I won't let you be lonely." That promise now slips away like coffee foam, sweet at first, bitter later, and finally nothing remains. I clear the dishes, wipe the coffee stains, stack the bills neatly, as if surface order could hold onto a house that's cracking. In the corner of the sink, a bent spoon reflects my face, distorted and blurred. I smile at myself, the smile of someone who knows how to be silent. People say betrayal begins with a lie. I think it begins with swallowed sentences. My, "I'm fine," his, "I'm busy," and the chime of a message not meant for me. Rain comes, tapping its fingernails on the window pane. Once, rain was an excuse for us to hold each other. Now it only makes the walls colder. I pull the old blanket over my shoulders and sit in the living room. From upstairs, the floorboards creak. The phone vibrates again. His voice drops, whispering, a tone that hasn't been directed at me for a long time. I hear him laugh. Laughter that was once the heartbeat of the house is now a blade scoring the door crack. I lie on my side, watching the red digits read 147. I picture myself standing before a scale. On one side, the past. Burnt-edged pancakes, black and white films, a frayed blanket. On the other, The present. The blue glow of a screen and a turned back. Which side is heavier? The answer changes with each vibration of the phone. At daybreak, the house is quiet. I fell asleep. The next morning, Ethan gets up first. No goodbye kiss, no "see you later." Just a curt nod. The door closes, cold air pouring through the crack. On the table, his cup bears a dry coffee stain. I run my fingertip along the rim, leaving a tiny, clean streak. Habits are the last things left when love has fallen away, I think, then switch on the kettle like a machine. I open the expense notebook. Rent, electricity, gas, credit card. I write post office, extension, call the landlord, ask to defer, take extra evening shift. In the middle of the page, I write big enough, then cross it out. No subtraction can beat the multiplication of fatigue. A message from a colleague asks to swap shifts. I reply, okay, without checking what I promised the day before. The morning house glares like an overexposed photo. What needs to be seen sinks into shadow. The empty chair beside me. What doesn't need to be seen stands out. Wall stains, ceiling cracks, a torn curtain thread. In the afternoon, I come home early and cook a proper meal. Chicken soup, mashed potatoes, garlic bread. I fold napkins, pour water, wanting to believe the smell of butter will call him back. He comes in, the smell of rain following. Eat? I ask. He sits, opens his phone. Up to you. I ladle the soup. The spoon drops into the bowl just as his screen lights up. His eyes light up too. The distance between two people can be measured by how often they smile in front of each other. That night, our number was 0. Do you have anything to tell me? I try to keep my voice from cracking. He looks up for a second, then down again. Nothing, don't make a fuss. Then, look at me and say, nothing, can you? I speak as if setting an anchor. I'm tired. He pushes back his chair. Don't make me explain. The napkin in my hand trembles slightly. I toss out a casual line. If dreaming were free, I'd wish for a day without counting coins. He doesn't laugh. I stop joking too. I go on, as if tugging the last string. Maybe I'll buy a lottery ticket tomorrow. Who knows? There might be grace. The string touches the air. Yeah, keep dreaming, he replies. Clearing the dishes, I drop a cup. It shatters, flashing like fish scales under the light. I kneel to pick it up. A thin cut slices my fingertip. Blood oozes, bright red, real enough to feel like release. So there are still things that make me feel pain. Night falls. I stand at the window, hugging a cup of hot tea. Across the street, the neighbor's house glows yellow, the shadows of 2 children chasing each other. I press my forehead to the glass, seeing my reflection layered over that scene, hazy, blurred, alien. Which one is me? The woman who believed in burnt-edged mornings, or the one listening to her husband's laughter in another room, meant for someone else? The rain answers by continuing to fall. In bed, I turn my back, and he turns his. His phone is face down under the pillow, like a small chest keeping secrets. I count breaths, then suddenly understand. Betrayal doesn't necessarily have a name or an address. It can be a chain of small choices, each day, choosing not to look at each other. The next morning, I place the keys beside a sticky note. I'm leaving early, back late. There's soup in the fridge. I add a smiley face, then erase it, finding it ridiculous. Before leaving, I gather some coins, unconsciously pick the smoothest one, and spin it on my fingertip. I whisper, if there's still a miracle, please don't be late. The coin spins fast, then tips over. Both sides look the same, a tired streak of light. I close the door, my heart empty. Inside, the clock goes on. Outside, the rain goes on. In between, I learn how to breathe in a house that has begun to soak through. And in a very brief moment, a line of words appears in my chest, cold and clear. Our story has begun to end, not with a scream, but with a swipe of a screen. I don't yet know what tomorrow will bring. I only know that tonight, as I slip the coin into my wallet, a quiet thought clings to me. If grace is real, perhaps it will come in the humblest form, a thin slip of paper, a sad little joke. And I don't yet know that that small piece of paper will be the tiny needle that splits open the entire seam of my life. It was raining that day, a heavy, lingering rain, as if the sky was also trying to wash away the things I was about to no longer believe in. I left the supermarket close to 9 at night. The streetlights cast their glow onto the asphalt mottled with water, illuminating each of my tired steps. The wind blew so hard that the torn umbrella was useless. I hurried into the convenience store at the end of the street, the place I stopped by almost every night to buy some milk or discounted bread. Mr. Lewis, the shop owner, stood behind the counter. He was over 60, always wearing glasses that slipped down his nose, with a gentle smile. "Grace, out on the street at this hour? In weather this bad?" I smiled, brushing the rain from my hair. "Night shift, sir. Rain or not, I still have to get home." He poured me a cup of hot cocoa, didn't charge me, then brought out a fresh Powerball ticket. "Take this. Who knows, maybe today luck will choose the right person." I laughed, half serious, half joking. "If I win, I'll buy this shop from you so you can retire early." "Don't forget that promise," he said, his voice still as warm as those who never doubt that good can come. I put the ticket in my coat pocket, thanked him, then stepped outside. The rain was still pouring down, cold as needles. The street was almost deserted, only the sound of water splashing up when cars passed by. When I reached Ethan's car, I saw him sitting inside, the light from his phone reflecting on his face. Faint, cold, and distant. I opened the door and got in. Dampness spread over me. "Sorry I'm late." Mr. Lewis kept me talking. He didn't answer. He just nodded, eyes still looking straight ahead. The air was clotted, as if someone had turned off the music halfway through a love song. I tried to add a bit of cheer. "He gave me this lottery ticket. Said maybe it's a late-coming miracle." I took out the ticket and placed it lightly on the dashboard. "Maybe this is the ticket that changes our lives." He glanced at it, the corner of his mouth slightly curved but not quite a smile. "Yeah, if you believe in miracles?" His voice trailed off. Then he started the car. The wipers swept evenly across the windshield, blurring the whole world outside. I looked at the ticket lying askew, trembling with the car's jostle, not knowing. That very slip of paper was about to become the boundary between my past and the rest of my life. That night, the house was strangely quiet. I cooked a simple meal. He ate in silence, eyes glued to his phone. The way he smiled faintly and then immediately stopped when he caught my gaze made my heart tighten. I wanted to ask, but didn't have the courage to hear the answer. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen while he sat on the sofa, winding the charging cable around his finger, eyes empty. "Ethan," I called softly. He didn't answer. "Do you think we're still okay?" "Grace, don't start again." He sighed, his voice tired. "You worry about everything. I just want peace. I'm not blaming you. I just want to understand you." "Understand?" He let out a dry laugh. "You don't understand anything. You're always afraid, always complaining, always controlling. I'm suffocating because of that." His words slapped me straight in the face. I stood still, my hand trembling slightly. "I'm just trying to hold us together," I replied. "And you're trying to leave?" He turned to look at me, his eyes cold as metal. "Maybe we both know that. It's just that you won't admit it." He stood up and went straight upstairs. The sound of the door closing was neat and firm. I sat down on the chair, my hands still shaking. I looked around the room. The wedding photo frames, a few porcelain mugs, everything was still there. Only the feeling was gone. I pulled out the Powerball ticket, set it on the table, and gave a faint smile. A miracle. If it really exists, it probably won't come to someone like me. I folded the ticket and tossed it lightly onto the dashboard of his car still parked on the porch, thinking that tomorrow I'd throw it away with the rest of the paper trash. I didn't know I had just thrown away half the fate of my life. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. He shaved, combed his hair, dressed more neatly than usual. "Do you have an appointment?" I asked. He replied, "Yeah, a few things to take care of. Will you come back?" He only smiled without answering. That whole day, I cleaned the house like a robot, washed dishes, mopped floors, did laundry. Everything went on steadily, as if my hands were operating while my heart had stopped working. When I opened the drawer, I saw the Powerball ticket was no longer on the table. I didn't care. Maybe Ethan had tidied up. Maybe he'd thrown it away. A thin ticket meant nothing to someone trying to leave a marriage. In the afternoon, I went to work, telling myself that tomorrow would be different, that if I tried, he would come back like before. I didn't know that every tomorrow after that would only be fragments. 3 days later, we had a real fight. For the first time in many years, Ethan no longer kept his steady tone. He shouted, his clenched hands pale. "Who do you think I am, Grace? A failure, right? I work like crazy, but you still criticize. I'm too tired," I shouted back, eyes brimming with tears. "When have I ever criticized you? I just don't want you to be so distant. I'm still here, trying to save this." "This?" He laughed bitterly. "You call our marriage this? You know what, Grace? I feel sorry for both of us. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married in the first place." That sentence, cold and heavy, fell like the last stone that collapsed the bridge. I stood still. All the sounds around me seemed to cut off. I only heard my heart beating, pounding with sharp pain. "You're right," I replied softly. "We shouldn't have married, but not because of me, because you never wanted to stay." He said nothing more. A moment later, he grabbed his coat and walked out. I heard his car start, then fade away, dissolving into the night. I sank down on the chair, tears falling without feeling. Everything I had ever feared finally arrived, only I no longer had the strength to resist. That night, when the city was quiet, I sat alone on the porch steps. The rain had stopped. Only dew clung to the railing. I looked up at the sky, thinking about the forgotten lottery ticket. A meaningless scrap of paper, a small joke, and me, the foolish woman who once called it a miracle. I wondered whether there was any miracle that could save a heart already shattered. Whether there could be grace for someone who always believes in the smallest things, only to be betrayed by them. I didn't know. I only knew that, at that moment, I still believed. Believed that if I was patient enough, everything would get better. I didn't expect that. In just a few days, the world would be turned upside down by a string of numbers on that ticket. A string of numbers that he would call destiny, and I would call the first cut that begins the price to be paid for faith. That morning, the radio loudspeaker in the supermarket suddenly burst out. "A Powerball ticket worth $500 million has won at Lewis's convenience store, on the corner of Lincoln Street." The whole row of counters went silent for half a second, and then buzzed like a marketplace. I stood frozen, my hand still scanning barcodes while my mind went blank. Lincoln Street, the place where I had sheltered from the rain, where Mr. Lewis had slipped into my hand the late miracle ticket. In my head, images fast-forwarded, raindrops falling on my hand, Ethan's faint laugh, the car's dashboard where I had placed that thin piece of paper like a joke. I asked to leave my shift early, ran outside into the smeared drizzle, hearing my heart pound fast as if someone were chasing right behind me. The house door opened, the air inside cold like a storage room. "Ethan?" No one answered. I turned on the light, the yellow glow pouring over the table still strewn with half-finished dishes. On the sofa was a long dent where someone had once sat too long. On the stair landing, an old coat like a hurried footprint. I rushed up to the bedroom, the closet gaped open, hangers swaying, a few bright dust motes floating in a thin shaft of light. The study, the document drawers empty, a pale rectangular print on the shelf where the computer had just disappeared. Emptiness touched my chest. He had left like someone tidying a hotel room, without a single trace to spare. I turned back down by instinct, as if the answer always stood waiting at the threshold. There, a rain-soaked cardboard box, hastily sealed with dull tape. On the lid, a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. "Yours." I knelt down, pulled the tape, the smell of damp paper and old soap wafting up. Inside, a few books whose corners I had folded, the winter sweater my mother sent, the wedding photo frame cracked with an ugly line, the chipped Christmas mug. And lying at the bottom, so heavy it pulled my hand down, my wedding ring. No box, no note, no words. Just a cold circle of metal, like a full stop placed straight into a sentence still unfinished. I sat flat on the floor. I didn't cry, because tears were a luxury I had spent up in the previous nights. The cold from the ring seeped into my skin and then circled up to my neck, making me shiver the way people do before a room suddenly goes dark. In my head, everything seemed to rearrange itself. The ticket on the dashboard, the time he brushed aside the Grace story, the times he swiped to delete messages, the line, "Don't make a fuss, Grace." I placed the ring in my palm, closed it as if holding a river stone, and understood. He hadn't just left. He had prepared to leave. 3 days later, social media exploded. A photo spread. Ethan in a suit, chin slightly lifted, a champagne glass catching the camera flash. Beside him was Lauren, blonde hair falling in waves, bright eyes, a smile like young spring grass. The caption, "The mysterious lottery winner appears." I looked at that frame and felt the world shrink into a hard block of glass, while I stood tiny outside, my forehead pressed to the surface. Glittering comments ran below. "Born to be rich. What a perfect couple. Wish I could get lucky too." I turned off the phone, and the room suddenly rang with an emptiness like a seashell. That evening, I turned on all the lights, sat at the dining table, my hand resting on the now rough wood. The wooden floor creaked from time to time as if longing for old footsteps. I placed the ring in the middle of the table, looked at it until my eyes stung. I wanted to throw it at the wall, but my hand drew back. There are things that, once broken, take your voice with them. Instead of smashing, I poured water, took a sip, then breathed the truth into words. He took the ticket I bought. He chose her, chose money, and chose silence like a scalpel. The next afternoon, Mr. Lewis knocked on the door, his hands holding a loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. He looked at me, his aged eyes as if understanding more than people say. "I thought you were the winner," he sighed. "That day I saw your husband bring a blonde girl to confirm, said he bought it for her. The machine even scanned right at the time of the heavy rain." I kept a polite smile like adhesive, thanked him, and saw him to the door. As the door just closed, my legs surrendered, my back slid down the wall. There was no room left for the words coincidence or misunderstanding. The story fit so tightly you couldn't wedge in a fingernail. I moved house within a week, fast like pulling a long stitch out of old fabric. The new rented room was cheap, gray-painted walls, a narrow window looking out on an alley with a birch tree cut short at the top. I set a small desk in the brightest corner, put on it the old desk lamp and a notebook. On the wall, I stuck a white sheet of paper and wrote in red pen, "He took my miracle. I will take my truth." The word truth 3 times bolder, like a drumbeat keeping time for a heart learning to run again. In the days after that, the press laid out a story sweet as candy. The generous couple plans to donate. A new beginning, the American dream. Ethan posted a breezy status. When you dare to step out of the old, you will find the ambitious version of yourself. Another line, like a toss and catch. Sometimes, not everyone shares the same direction of view. I didn't comment. I finished washing the coffee cup, set it upside down in a perfectly straight line, and learned to let silence do its work. Carry the voice farther. I took extra night shifts. My hands hardened, the small scratches on my knuckles stung when they touched dish soap. By day, I began to run around the neighborhood, each lap a small addition to willpower. When I came back, I sat at the desk and redrew that rainy night on paper. Timeline, the ticket's position, the time the car left the porch, the time frame when he had business. I listed the things that could become key points: card receipts, the store camera, messages, bank statements, the weather report, Mr. Lewis's testimony. Each line on the paper was a thread. I traced them back to the very button that had been ripped off. Then I went back to the convenience store. Mr. Lewis opened the safe, pulled out the sales ledger, and showed me the firm lines of writing, the time the ticket was printed, the cash register number, the name of the employee on duty. "The camera in this corner is often blurry," he said, "but you can see a silhouette. The time frame. Here." His voice was slow, like retelling an old song. I thanked him, feeling as if my body had bones again after a time of being just a lump of soft dough. That night, back in the room, I placed the ring on the windowsill, letting thin silver moonlight cover it. I whispered, "You chose to leave in silence. I will choose to return in silence." The wind threaded through the cracks, stirring the cheap curtain to sound like someone nodding. I took a pen and wrote down a single sentence. "The truth doesn't need to shout." Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light. Darkness was no longer a pit. It was a launch pad for eyes becoming familiar with the outlines. The next morning, I wore a crisp white shirt, tied up my hair neatly, put a red pen and a notebook into my bag. I looked at the paper on the wall once more, letting the red letters stitch the frayed edge of my heart. I knew where I would go, whom I would meet, what I would ask. I knew a simple truth. Sharp as a newly honed blade, he had taken what did not belong to him. And I, who had once placed the ticket on the dashboard like a joke, would be serious to the very end about the only thing left: the truth. He had written an exit with a thin piece of paper. I would write my way back with a thick file. And when those pages touched at the exact point, silence would sound like thunder. I closed the room door, the latch clicking neatly, not to hide, but to begin. I don't remember exactly when I started waking up before dawn. Maybe it was after the night I wrote the red words on the wall. "He took my miracle. I will take my truth." Since then, every morning, when the first light slips through the blinds, I make a cup of coffee and sit on the narrow windowsill of my apartment, watching the city slowly wake up. No one knows what I'm thinking, but I do. It's the only hour of the day when I'm honest with myself. Not the abandoned wife, not the victim of betrayal, but someone quietly gathering the scattered pieces of her life. The new life isn't easy. I work 2 jobs, morning shifts at the supermarket and evening ones at a small diner. At first, people looked at me with pity, but slowly I saw that pity fade. They began greeting me with real smiles, no longer cautious like they were talking to someone who had lost everything. Maybe because I no longer looked like someone who'd lost. I looked like someone rebuilding, brick by brick, with her bare hands. At night, after washing dishes and clearing tables, I stay behind alone at the diner, using napkins to dry the last streaks of water on the wooden surface. I like that feeling, seeing everything clean, neat, owing no one. Maybe because inside, I still have one debt left unpaid, but not of money. It's a debt of truth. One afternoon, I stopped by Mr. Lewis's convenience store. He was wiping the counter, his familiar stooped posture unchanged. When he saw me, he smiled, the same gentle smile, as if nothing dark had ever happened. "Grace, haven't seen you in a while. How have you been?" "I'm fine," I answered, though I knew that word had never truly fit. I stood there a while looking at the rows of lottery tickets hanging behind him. Each thin sheet shimmered under the light, just like the one I had held that rainy night, the one that changed my whole life. I asked, trying to sound casual, "Do you remember that ticket, Mr. Lewis? That rainy evening before you closed, you gave me your last Powerball ticket." He squinted, thinking, then nodded slowly. "Of course." I even said, "Who knows? Maybe it's a miracle." But I didn't expect. I pressed my lips together. Didn't expect it to be someone else's miracle. Mr. Lewis fell silent. He understood. He had seen thousands of faces buying tickets, but only a few he remembered. Mine, he remembered clearly. Because that day, I was soaked, as if I had walked straight out of a storm. After a pause, he said softly, "My register still keeps the sales history. If you need it, I can reprint the receipt from that night. The ticket's serial number, sale time, register code, everything's still there." I looked at him, frozen for a few seconds. My heart pounded as if I had just seen the first beam of light pierce a heavy fog. "You can really do that?" He nodded lightly, as if it were nothing. But to me, it was an explosion. A lightning strike cutting through the dark corner I'd been trapped in all this time. That night, I sat at my desk in the small apartment, staring at the faint receipt Mr. Lewis had printed for me. It read clearly, May 14th, 7:42 p.m., Lewis Store. Powerball ticket, B4928736. At the bottom, cashier, L. Lewis. Just a small slip of paper, yet my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I pressed it to my chest, closed my eyes. Memories surged back. The rain, the sound of the car door shutting, Ethan's faint smile, his cold eyes when he said, "Don't make a fuss, Grace." And then, like a needle piercing the fog, I remembered. When I placed the ticket on the dashboard, he had leaned down, opened the glove box to grab a cloth to wipe the windshield. When he looked up, his eyes had paused on the ticket. Just for a second, but long enough for me to realize he saw it the way a man sees an escape. I opened my old laptop, searched the news about the lottery winner. There were hundreds of articles, but in the corner of one, a small detail caught my eye. The lucky couple appeared at the lottery office at 8:25 p.m. on May 14th. I looked at the time printed on the receipt. 7:42 p.m. 43 minutes. Only 43 minutes after I bought the ticket. The truth was sharp and clear as a blade. Ethan had taken the ticket, gone straight to the office, and claimed it under someone else's name. That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat there quietly, staring at the paper in my hand. It was small, thin, but heavy enough to awaken the part of me I thought had died. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I was a witness. And if he thought he could erase me from the story, he forgot one thing. Every miracle leaves a trace. I turned on the light, opened the drawer, and took out my wedding ring. It was still cold, but this time the feeling was different. No longer pain, but purpose. I put it back on, not to remember him, but to remind myself. I survived. I wrote another line on the paper taped to my wall. He stole my miracle, but he left the trail. In the days that followed, I reached out to an old friend, Tom Reed, a local attorney. We had gone to high school together. We'd lost touch for years, but when he heard my trembling voice over the phone, he simply said, "Let's meet, Grace. Don't do this alone." When I told him everything, Tom stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, he said firmly, "This isn't just about money. It's about truth. And truth may take time, but it doesn't disappear." I looked at him, my eyes red, but for the first time, my heart felt lighter. Not because someone believed me, but because I no longer had to carry all the silence alone. That night, I went home, opened the receipt again, and tucked it carefully into my notebook. Then I wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. "The storm took everything, but the calm will take it back." I went to bed in my small room, listening to the rain outside the window. The rain still fell like that first night, but now I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I understood. The rain doesn't come to drown us, but to wash away the dust on the road we must walk. And somewhere amid the steady rhythm of falling drops, I heard my own voice whisper in the dark, "Ethan, you once stole my miracle, but you'll never take my heart. You'll see. Sometimes, redemption doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be right." I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I slept deeply. I didn't dream of him, only of a faint light at the end of a long road, the light of truth. I once thought that to get revenge, a person had to scream, to rebel, to burn everything down. But it turns out, the strongest thing isn't fire, it's deliberate silence. After meeting with Tom, I went back to my apartment, placed the lottery receipt in the middle of the table, and looked at it as if it were a small door slightly ajar. On the other side was justice, but to step through, I had to accept one truth. No one was going to save me, except me. The days that followed, I lived with the precision of someone drawing up a battle plan for her own life. Mornings at work, evenings meeting Tom. He helped me make a list of what we needed. A certified copy of the original receipt. A signed statement from Lewis's store. Powerball transaction data for May 14th. And finally, proof verifying the identity of the person who claimed the prize. I looked at the list, feeling both nervous and burning inside. Nervous because I was still Grace, the woman who once lowered her eyes under her husband's gaze. Burning because I was becoming a new version of myself, clear-headed, steady, and no longer afraid. One morning, Tom called. "Grace, I've sent the verification request to the state lottery office. They might contact you to confirm the purchase details. Be ready." "I understand." I put down the phone and sat still for a moment. My heart beat fast, but not from fear. It was the heartbeat of someone about to face the truth after months of living in the dark. That afternoon, after my shift, I stopped by the convenience store. Mr. Lewis had printed another copy of the receipt and signed it. "Everything matches the system. You bought the ticket at 7:42 p.m. I held the paper, my hands trembling slightly. "Thank you. I owe you more than I thought." He just smiled. "No one owes anyone, Grace. The truth should always find its way back to the one who deserves it." On the way home, I watched the traffic passing by and felt something strange. The world still moved as if no one had ever been betrayed, as if no one had lost an entire life over a slip of paper. But to me, every headlight, every horn, suddenly had meaning, because they were witnessing a woman rising again, quietly, but as steadfast as the ground beneath her feet. A few days later, I received a call from the state lottery office. The woman's voice on the other end was calm and procedural. "Hello, this is the Lincoln State Lottery office. We're calling to verify a transaction from May 14th at Lewis's store. Can you confirm that you purchased the Powerball ticket with serial number 4928736? I gripped the phone and took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm the one who bought that ticket." She paused for a few seconds, then said, "Thank you. The system data matches your receipt." I thought I'd misheard. "You said it matches?" "Yes. According to our system, the 7:42 p.m. transaction matches sale ID MR4928736. However, the person who claimed the prize at 8:25 p.m. signed as Lauren Carter will need additional time to verify this. Thank you for your cooperation." I said nothing more. The phone slipped from my hand and fell onto the bed. The room went utterly silent. Only my heartbeat echoed against my ribs. Inside my head, everything came rushing back. That dinner, the rain, Ethan's evasive eyes, the brush of his hand when I placed the ticket on the dashboard, his faint, mocking laugh. "Yeah, keep dreaming, Grace." So he knew. He had been waiting for the right moment. And the miracle I thought I'd thrown away was the ladder he used to climb over me, to reach the top he'd always wanted. I sat still for a long time. No tears, no shaking. Then I laughed. A strained, brittle laugh, sharp and bitter. Something inside me broke and turned into steel. I stood up, opened the drawer, and took out the wedding ring. Its gold glinted under the light, cold but blazing. I slid it back onto my finger. Not out of love, but as a mark of a new vow. I looked at myself in the mirror. The pale face I once knew now had a different shape. Firmer, clearer. No longer a woman waiting to be saved. Only a woman preparing to act. I opened my laptop and began typing. Statement of claim. Fraudulent misuse of lottery winnings. Grace Miller versus Ethan Miller. Tom read it, made a few edits, then smiled. "Now he'll learn, Grace. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation." I nodded. For the first time in months, I felt like I was truly breathing. That night, I sat by the window. Moonlight spread thin across the wooden floor. Below, the city was still noisy, but inside this room, it was so quiet I could hear my own pulse. I whispered, for no one but myself, "You can take my money, my name, even my pride, but you'll never take the truth, because it's in the hands of the only person brave enough to tell the whole story. Me." I smiled, a calm smile, soft as the final breath of a storm. Outside, the rain began to fall again, but this time I wasn't afraid. I knew the rain was washing away old traces, clearing the path for justice to arrive. The next morning, I went to see Tom and handed over all the documents. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Grace, don't rush. This will be a long fight." I replied evenly, "I've spent my whole life waiting for people to believe me. Now I'll wait, just to let the truth speak." He nodded. I stepped out of his office, the sunlight touching my hair, golden and warm. It felt like I had just walked out of a long winter. On the busy street, everything seemed sharply clear. Every sound, every face, every breath of wind. The world no longer felt cruel. Maybe when you finally touch the truth, you don't just reclaim justice, you reclaim yourself. That evening, I added another line to the wall beside the old one. He forged my name on it, but I will carve mine back into history. I sat down, staring at the red words, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. And I knew there was no turning back. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to end this story the only way it deserved, with truth heard and justice seen. Softly, into the dark, I said, "You played your game with lies. Now it's my turn, with truth." Outside, the night was still as glass, but beneath the surface, a wave was forming, and I, Grace Miller, was the one who made it. If anyone asked me what the hardest thing after betrayal was, I wouldn't say forgiveness. It's learning how to be silent, without feeling weak. I used to fear silence. During the years of marriage, whenever Ethan went quiet, I would speak for him. About the weather, about food, about work, about anything to fill the gap. Now I sit in an empty apartment listening only to the ticking clock, and I realize silence doesn't kill me. It's feeding me back to life. When Tom came on Monday morning, he brought a thick stack of files and a neat handwritten plan on old yellow paper. He placed it on my small kitchen table and said firmly, "We'll do this your way, quietly, without noise." Ethan took everything in silence. So in silence, we'll take it back. I looked at the slanted words written at the top. The silent strategy. Tom pointed to each line. Official verification from Lewis's store, including signed confirmation and camera footage, documents from the Lincoln State Lottery office, identifying the person who claimed the prize, cross-checks of bank records, transfers and property purchases within 30 days of claiming, preservation of all online evidence, photos, posts, statements, timestamps. He spoke evenly, coldly, without wasting a single word, like a commander leading a battle where truth was the only weapon. I asked softly, "Do you really think we have a chance?" Tom lifted his head and looked straight at me. "Grace, I've seen a lot of fraud cases, but I've never seen anyone with facts, timing, and motive as clear as yours. You don't just have a chance, you have justice." I pressed my lips together. For the first time in months, someone wasn't looking at me like a woman abandoned, but like someone preparing to strike back. The days that followed, I lived as two parallel selves. By day, I worked at the supermarket, smiling just enough, answering only what was asked. By night, I came home and turned my tiny kitchen into my investigation headquarters. On the wall, I pinned dozens of notes, times, places, names, connections. At the center, in red ink, 7:42 p.m., 8:25 p.m., 43 minutes changed everything. I stared at that line every night, as if it were the map of my life. Tom came almost every evening, bringing black coffee and new printed files. Some nights he sat silently by the laptop, replaying the store's camera footage. I sat beside him, holding my breath. In the frame, I saw myself, a woman in a gray raincoat, hair tangled, hands trembling as she paid, forcing a small smile when Mr. Lewis said, "Good luck." A tired smile, unaware that a few hours later everything she knew about the world would collapse. "This is the first marker," Tom said, pointing at the screen corner. "No Ethan, no Lauren, just you and Mr. Lewis. Now look at this." He switched to another clip, footage from the outdoor camera, 8:20 p.m. A black car stopped. Ethan stepped out, dark coat, with Lauren beside him. I saw him lean down, whisper something to her, and together they walked inside. No more doubt. He had come, right after me. I watched the screen, my throat dry. Part of me wanted to scream, another part wanted to laugh. Tom glanced at me and asked gently, "You okay?" I nodded, smiling faintly. I've waited a long time for this moment. Each time we secured another piece of evidence, I marked the date and time and pinned it to the wall. Now the white wall was covered in red ink and yellow paper. From a distance, it looked like a war map, and at its center, his name, Ethan Miller. I don't know exactly when I changed. Maybe when I stopped dreaming he'd come back. Or maybe when I stopped searching for reasons to forgive him. I no longer wanted him to regret. I only wanted the truth acknowledged, no matter who it hurt. One night, after reviewing the files, Tom said, "We've got enough to file the case. But Grace, from now on, you need to be careful. Ethan's not stupid. When he feels threatened, he'll react." I met his eyes and said calmly, "Then let him think I've given up." He laughed softly. "Perfect plan." I began deleting my social media, cutting contact with mutual friends, even changing my phone number. If Ethan was watching me, he'd only see a woman who'd accepted her fate. Quietly, working, surviving. but he wouldn't know that behind every cup of coffee I made was another night spent writing the chronicle of truth. One evening, Tom asked me, "Grace, have you ever thought about stopping?" I was silent for a moment, then said, "Yes." But then I remember opening that rain-soaked box by the door, seeing my wedding ring lying at the bottom, cold as ice. And in that moment I knew. If I didn't stand up, that silence would swallow me forever. Tom said nothing, just nodded. And from that day I stopped calling it a lawsuit. I called it a rebirth. When the case file was complete, Tom brought me the final draft. Grace Miller versus Ethan Miller. Fraudulent claim of lottery winnings. I looked at the two names. Once I had dreamed of them side by side, on a small shop sign, or on an anniversary card. Now they stood opposite like two sides of a battlefield. I didn't cry. I just felt light. Finally, I wasn't a shadow behind him anymore. I was the one standing across from him, with truth as my shield and silence as my sword. I picked up the pen and signed. The ink spread smoothly, each stroke firm. I didn't tremble. Not anymore. That night I wrote one more line on the wall. "We fight this quietly. He took everything from me in silence. Now silence and truth will take it back." I read it over and over, each word echoing like a heartbeat. Silence, truth. Two things that seemed fragile, yet outlasted every promise ever made. I blew out the candle, letting the room sink into soft darkness. Outside, the wind slipped through the window frame. I closed my eyes and heard it whisper, "Grace, you're not a victim anymore." I smiled. I didn't know if I imagined it, or if the room was smiling back. I knew this battle would be long, brutal, and it might cost me more than I could guess. But this time, I wasn't afraid, because in silence, I had finally found the truest voice of my life. People often say the truth comes softly, like the wind. But for me, it came like a storm, fierce, tearing everything apart, leaving no one untouched. That morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop on the table. Tom's voice was urgent. "Grace, the court accepted our filing, but there's something else. It's been leaked to the press." I sat up, breath catching. "You mean leaked?" "Yes. Someone from the clerk's office must have talked. The Lincoln Post already ran the story. Now every outlet is picking it up. You're about to be the center of it all." I looked out the window. The sky was heavy, clouds pressing low over the rooftops. A storm was waiting. "It's all right, Tom," I said quietly, calmer than I felt. "I lived among lies for years and stayed standing. I won't fall just because the truth's been exposed." He paused, then said softly, "Brace yourself, Grace. The storm's begun." By noon, the internet was on fire. Every headline screamed my name, Grace Miller, the betrayed wife suing ex-husband for stealing a $500 million jackpot. A photo of me leaving the courthouse spread everywhere. My head slightly bowed, my face calm, the light cutting across so my shadow stretched long on the wet pavement. A small figure, but suddenly, everywhere. The comments poured in. "If it's true, that man's a monster. She's after money, nothing else." Straight out of a movie. I read the first few lines, then stopped. No anger, no sadness. People love to judge pain they've never carried. But beneath the noise, I felt one thing clearly. The truth had been unlocked. That afternoon, Ethan called. His name flashing on the screen made my heart race. I hesitated, then answered. His voice lashed out like hot wind. "What the hell did you do, Grace? You trying to destroy me?" I said evenly. "No, Ethan. I don't need to do anything. You're doing that yourself." His breath came sharp through his teeth. "You're humiliating yourself. You think anyone will believe a failed, abandoned woman like you?" I stayed silent. The pause unsettled him. Grace, I'm warning you. Drop the case, or you'll regret it. I spoke softly, but my voice cut clean, cold. You're wrong, Ethan. I've already regretted enough. For both of us. Now it's your turn. Then I hung up. For the first time in my life, I silenced the voice that once made me tremble. 3 days later, the story had gone national. They called me many names. The quiet wife, the wife of truth, the ghost of the lottery winner. One headline read, Grace Miller's story proves one simple thing. Truth can be buried, but it cannot be destroyed. I gave no interviews, no statements, no reactions. Tom said it was the right move. Silence, Grace. The quieter you are, the louder the truth becomes. Meanwhile, Ethan started to crack. He appeared on television. Tailored suit, exhausted eyes. That ticket wasn't Grace's, he said. My ex-wife's using this to get revenge. I watched the interview from my dim apartment. When the reporter asked, Do you have proof? He just forced a thin smile. I closed my eyes. No need to argue. The more a liar speaks, the clearer the truth sounds. Lauren was the first to break. A week later, a shaky video of her appeared online. Pale face, trembling voice. I didn't know. The ticket was Grace's. Ethan told me to sign, said it was personal. I was wrong. One sentence. And the internet exploded. The storm that once tore through me now spun back toward him. Ethan tried to control the narrative, but the harder he fought, the deeper he sank. Old photos surfaced. Him withdrawing cash, buying houses, cars, vacations with Lauren, all matching the timeline of the winnings. I did nothing. Just watched. Everything unfolded exactly as Tom once said, Don't attack. Let the lies destroy themselves. On the morning of the hearing, I wore a simple gray suit. No makeup, no armor. When I stepped out of the car, camera flashes burst like fireworks. Reporters shouted, Grace, do you have a message for your ex-husband? Are you seeking revenge? I stopped, looked straight into the lens. No, I said. I'm not after revenge. I just want back what I lost. The truth. Flashes popped again. I turned and walked inside. Tom was waiting, gave me a small nod. No words needed. I knew. Today wasn't the end. It was the day the world would see the beginning of justice. That night, the news replayed my image. A journalist said, What moves people isn't just her story. It's the way she stands silent, steady, in the eye of the storm. I sat alone in my apartment, the TV light flickering across the wall. The old words still glowed faintly. He took everything from me in silence. Now silence and truth will take it back. I picked up the red pen and added below, and I will not whisper anymore. The ink dried against the wall. I looked at it and smiled, slow, quiet. That night, Ethan called again. No threats this time, just a long, heavy breath. Grace, I'm sorry. I answered, No need. The truth already said it for you. He paused, then asked, What do you want? My voice was soft as wind. Not money, not remorse. I just want you to live honestly with your guilt. That's all I leave you. I ended the call. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The real storm had begun. I opened the window, let the wind rush in. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the rain. The cool drops touched my hands, washing away the last of what clung to me. In the sound of rain, I heard something strange, a quiet blooming inside my chest. Ethan, I whispered, you once taught me silence was weakness, but now I know. Silence is the strength of those who stand in truth. And in this storm, my silence is the loudest thunder of all. I closed the window, turned off the light, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, the wind screamed through the city's cracks, but inside I was calm. because for the first time, I wasn't a victim of silence. I was its master. The storm was roaring outside, and I, Grace Miller, simply smiled. Because I knew, after the storm, the only thing left standing would be the truth. I never thought I would return to this place, the court, where people draw the line between right and wrong with paperwork, signatures, and cold oaths. But this morning, standing in that corridor of cold stone, I felt a strange calm. No longer the woman left with cardboard boxes on the porch. No longer the one screaming in vain. Today, I am not here to beg. I am here to prove. The sky was gray, a fine rain falling. The doors of the Lincoln State Courthouse opened, wide and cold like the doors of an ancient temple. Tom walked beside me, a thick file in his hand, his eyes steady. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "I've been for a long time, Tom. Today is just the end." Outside, a crowd of reporters surged like waves. Camera shutters clicked, flashes bursting without pause. "Grace, do you think you'll win? If you win, will you forgive your ex-husband? Do you have anything to say to him?" I only smiled slightly, without stopping. I had learned that silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments. As I stepped into the courtroom, my heart pounded but steadily. The room was large, with a high ceiling, white light cast across everyone's faces. Ethan was already seated at the other table, black suit, face cold as stone. Lauren sat beside him, dark circles under her eyes, fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. Looking at them, I saw a past I had once believed was happiness, now only remnants. I didn't hate. I only felt right. Judge Eleanor Brooks entered. An older woman, tall, with bright eyes and a voice that carried weight. I had read about her. A fair judge, known for rulings not only lawful, but humane. The trial of Grace Miller versus Ethan Miller, fraud in claiming the Powerball jackpot. Court is now in session. Her voice rang out, decisive as a blade cutting through fog. Tom opened the file, each page turning like a slow drumbeat. "Your Honor, today we bring verified evidence that my client, Mrs. Grace Miller, is the purchaser of the Powerball ticket that won $500 million. He held up the original receipt, a small slip of paper, the corner slightly creased. "This is the transaction print from Lewis's store at 7:42 p.m. on May 14th. The code matches exactly the ticket used to claim the prize. Mr. Ethan Miller, the defendant, used this very ticket to redeem the prize at 8:25 p.m. the same day." Across the room, Ethan curled his lip, his voice contemptuous. "No one can prove I wasn't the buyer. She could be making it up." Tom remained calm. He turned on the projector. Images appeared on the white wall. Me, in a gray raincoat, stepping into Lewis's store, hair wet, a bill in my hand. The footage was grainy but clear enough to make the room hold its breath. Mr. Lewis was present as well, and stood to confirm. It was her. I remember very clearly, it was pouring that day. I even wished her good luck. Tom nodded and played the second clip. 8:20 p.m. Ethan and Lauren entered, faces tense. A black car stopped right at the storefront. "Your Honor," Tom said, "this is the timing evidence. These two arrived nearly 43 minutes later and they did not buy a ticket. They only asked about the redemption process." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "The video could be edited." Tom simply stayed silent, then produced another document. "This is a copy of the signature from the Lincoln State Lottery office. A forensic comparison between the signature on the claim form and Mr. Ethan Miller's signature on a bank transaction from May 20th. The match is 96%. I heard the rustle of paper, the soft breath of Judge Brooks. She looked at Ethan and spoke gently, but with weight. "Mr. Miller, do you have anything in rebuttal?" Ethan was silent. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked around, then said quietly, She gave me the ticket. Said to keep it for her. Tom smiled, cold. And while keeping it, you redeemed it? Hid the money and left? No one answered. Only the judge's pen tapped lightly on the wooden bench. Then it was Lauren's turn. When called, she stepped forward, hands trembling. Her voice was thin, choked. I signed because Ethan said it was private. He said the ticket was his. I believed him. I was wrong. The courtroom stirred. Ethan lowered his head, hands clenched. I looked at the scene and felt no pain anymore. I felt as if I had set down a stone after a long journey of carrying it on my back. In the afternoon, after hours of proceedings, the court delivered its judgment. The air was taut as a string. Judge Brooks held the decision, her voice clear and slow. After reviewing all evidence, witness testimony, and verification from the lottery agency, the court finds Mrs. Grace Miller is the lawful purchaser of the Powerball ticket that won $500 million. Mr. Ethan Miller committed fraud, forged a signature, misappropriated assets, and absconded. Ethan lifted his head, eyes vacant. The judge's voice continued, like a bell. The court orders the defendant stripped of ownership rights and to return all remaining funds, as well as pay damages for emotional distress and legal costs to the plaintiff. Additionally, the court notes Mrs. Lauren Carter's testimony as a mitigating factor, but warns of joint liability in the matter. She paused a few seconds, looked straight at Ethan, then spoke slowly, each word distinct. Mr. Miller, greed is a prison you built yourself. Today, the court merely shows you its walls. The gavel struck. The sound echoed in my head, like an iron door closing on the past. People gasped. Lauren burst into tears. Ethan collapsed into his chair, eyes empty. I looked at him and felt no glee, only emptiness. The emptiness of someone who has passed through a pain too great, leaving no room for hatred. Tom touched my shoulder lightly and whispered, "You did it." I nodded, smiling softly. Not me. The truth. Stepping out of the courthouse, I lifted my head to the post-rain sky. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, gently golden. On the steps, the reporters rushed in again. One asked, "Grace, how do you feel about winning the case?" I answered, calm. I didn't defeat anyone. I only reclaimed what rightly should have been mine. Another asked, "Do you have anything to say to Ethan Miller?" I gazed into the distance and said softly, "I hope he finds peace in the very collapse of himself." The answer spread everywhere. The press called me the quiet winner. That evening, I returned to my small apartment. On the wall, the old words were still there, faded. He took everything from me in silence. Now silence and truth will take it back. I took a red pen and wrote beneath. And today, justice spoke. I sat quietly, watching the letters dry. No longer a woman of tears and fear. Only one Grace, calm, steady, and free. I switched on the light and made myself a cup of hot tea. The scent of mint filled the air. Outside, the night wind stirred, carrying the remnants of rain. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to wait for anyone to apologize. Justice had done it for me. When the court delivered its verdict, people said I had won. But for weeks afterward, I still didn't feel like a winner. I only felt empty, as if I'd just closed a book far too long, with every page soaked in blood and tears. It took me nearly a week to dare open my bank account. The number on the screen stunned me, $498 million after taxes and restitution. I didn't feel joy, only stillness. It was like seeing a loved one who'd been dead too long suddenly return, and not knowing whether to embrace them or turn away. I made a cup of tea and sat by the old window. Afternoon light slipped through the curtain. Pale, calm. For the first time in years, I could hear everything clearly: the wind, the cars outside, and my own heart. A quiet that felt real. Justice had been served. But justice doesn't bring happiness. It only brings the chance to begin again, if you're brave enough to take it. Tom visited me a few days later. He was still the same: calm, careful, few words. He placed a thick envelope on the table. "These are the final transfer papers, Grace. From now on, you can do anything you want." I stared at that envelope for a long time. Anything. But I no longer wanted anything. I only wanted what was right. "Tom," I asked, "do you believe someone can turn their pain into something good?" He smiled. "I don't just believe it. I'm seeing it right now." I began changing my life quietly. No luxury cars, no mansions, no extravagant trips. I stayed in the same apartment, just repainted the walls and planted a few small pots of flowers. Every morning, I brewed coffee, read the news, then walked through the city. No one recognized the woman who'd once been at the center of a national lawsuit. But something inside me was growing, the desire to rewrite the meaning of Miller. For so long, Miller had meant betrayal, deceit, greed. I couldn't let it remain a symbol of guilt. I wanted to make it stand for something kind. I started by donating a portion, $50 million, to funds that support victims of fraud and financial abuse. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to build a place where women like me, those who had lost their voice, could stand again. I called it the Quiet Foundation, a small place with a large purpose: to help those betrayed rediscover faith in themselves. Not through money, but through opportunity, work, education, and therapy. When Tom heard, he asked, "You're going to spend your life helping others?" I smiled. "No, I'm helping myself. I just want people to know silence isn't weakness. It's the stage before someone learns to rise." A year later, I opened Miller's Market, a small market on the edge of Lincoln City. It sold goods made by single mothers, widows, women who had lost everything. At the opening, I simply stood in the crowd, watching the colorful stalls: bread, dried flowers, handmade crafts. Small things, but each one carrying the weight of survival. A reporter approached and asked, "Why name it Miller's Market, when that's the surname of the man who hurt you?" I answered gently, "Because that name doesn't belong to him anymore." I took it back, and this time, I'll make it stand for compassion, not greed. The quote spread across social media. They called me the quiet winner. But I didn't care for titles. I only felt warm whenever I heard laughter in the market or saw a woman earn her first honest paycheck. One afternoon, a little girl about 8 ran up to me, holding a loaf of fresh bread. "Miss Grace, my mom said to thank you. She didn't have a job before. Now she works here." I knelt down, smiling. "Do you like this place?" "Yes, because my mom smiles a lot here." I smiled too. It turned out happiness could start from something as small as that, not from the number in a bank account, but from watching others stand up again. I still kept in touch with Tom. He often came by to check the foundation's paperwork, sometimes just for coffee and quiet talk. Once, he asked, "Grace, if you could go back, would you stop it all from happening?" I thought for a while, then shook my head. No. If it hadn't happened, I'd never have known how strong I was. Sometimes tragedy doesn't come to kill us. It comes to make us become who we are. He looked at me, eyes full of respect. "I believe you'll use that pain well?" I smiled. "I already am." Time passed, and all wounds slowly grew new skin. People spoke of me less. My name faded from headlines, and I was grateful for it. I wasn't born to be a story for others to tell. I only wanted to live, simply, peacefully, truthfully. One night I walked through Miller's Market long after closing. The yellow lights glowed over the path, reflecting off the glass storefronts still lit inside. I looked up at the wooden sign above, Miller's Market, where peace is the real prize. I touched the sign, warmth spreading through me. That name once made me tremble. Now, it made me proud. That night I went home and wrote in my journal, justice gave me closure, peace gave me purpose. I set the pen down, closed my eyes, listening to the wind through the window frame. Somewhere out there, maybe Ethan was still hiding in the darkness of himself. But I no longer thought of him with hate, only a distant pity, for a man who had lost his own soul. And I understood then, true justice doesn't only live in courts. Real justice is when you can look at your past without trembling, when you can smile and say, I don't forgive you because you deserve it. I forgive you because I deserve peace. That morning, as the sun rose, I opened the doors of Miller's Market and let the cool wind rush in. Above, the clouds broke apart, and light spilled across the colorful stalls. I took a deep breath, my heart weightless, and whispered, Greed blinded him. Grace freed me. And for the first time in many years, I truly felt free. Time has a strange way of soothing pain. It doesn't erase it. It only keeps the wounds from throbbing each time we touch them. 2 years have passed since the trial. I have gone far enough to understand this. Sometimes, victory doesn't lie in the court, but in the way we choose to end our own story. Miller's Market has now become a familiar place in the city. Every morning, the door chime rings along with the smell of baking bread, freshly brewed coffee, and the laughter of women who once feared tomorrow. They come, they work, they live, and they find themselves again. As for me, I still keep the habit of arriving early, opening the door, and breathing in deeply the scent of flour and happiness. Peace doesn't arrive suddenly. It comes like light shining through frosted glass. Slow, but enough to chase away the dark. One January morning, Lincoln was bitterly cold. Thin snow fell on my shoulders as I left Miller's Market, planning to stop by the old cafe on the corner, the one where I used to work during the hardest years. That place always makes me remember the beginning, and I wanted to go there today, not knowing why, just a vague urge inside. When I pushed the door open, the familiar bell rang. The space was the same as ever. The smell of bitter coffee mixed with old wood, soft jazz, and the slow clink of spoons stirring. I chose a seat by the window, ordered a cappuccino, and watched snowflakes melt slowly on the street. A part of me had completely closed the past, but sometimes fate has a way of making us look back, not to hurt us more, but to teach us how far we've truly let go. As I was lost in the view outside, a figure passed by the window. He wore a frayed coat, scuffed shoes, and carried a faded cloth bag. At first, I didn't recognize him, but when he turned his head and the light slid across that face, I knew at once. Ethan. The man who once made me cry myself dry now looked like a shadow of himself. Gaunt, with patchy stubble, sunken eyes, pale skin. He walked slowly, trembling, and pushed the door open. When the doorbell rang, my heart tightened. Not out of fear, but pity. He stood there for a few seconds, looking around until his eyes stopped on me. We looked at each other. Two people who once shared a roof, now left with a suffocating silence. Grace. His voice was hoarse, weak, like a man who had walked too long in the cold. I nodded. Hello, Ethan. He came over and sat in the chair across from me, his hands trembling as he held the hot coffee the server had just brought. No one said anything for a long while. Only the wind howled outside the window frame, and soft music threaded through the space between us. At last, he began. I heard you opened a market. Miller's Market. I smiled faintly. Yes, it's a new beginning. He nodded, eyes fixed on nothing. I saw your picture in the news. You look different, more at peace. I stayed silent. The words sounded like praise, and also a confession that he had never seen that peace when we were together. Then he sighed. I've lost everything, Grace. The house, the money. Lauren left too. She said I had nothing left to hold on to. He gave a dry, rasping laugh. Now I've only got this bag and 2 empty hands. I looked at him. Those hands, once held mine, once wrote promises, were now cracked and thin. I no longer recognized the man the whole world once saw in a fine suit. I'm sorry, he said softly. I looked up. The 3 words I had waited years to hear finally sounded. But strangely, my heart didn't burst, didn't tremble. Only a feeling of stillness. I'm sorry for everything, for my greed, for my betrayal, for making you bear it alone. His voice choked, his eyes glistening. I looked at him and asked quietly, Are you sorry for hurting me, or for losing yourself? He didn't answer. His silence was the answer. I opened my bag, took out a few bills, and set them on the table. Here, for your coffee. And a little something to help you start over. Don't misunderstand, Ethan. It isn't pity. This is how I end it. He froze, eyes widening, then said softly, You're still as kind as ever. I shook my head. No, I'm not the same person anymore. I've just learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer letting the past hurt me. I stood, put on my coat. Before leaving, I turned back and looked him in the eye. I forgive you, Ethan. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Then I left. Stepping out of the cafe, the snow was falling thicker. White flakes covered the street, turning to water as they touched my cheeks. I lifted my face to the sky, cold but clear. For the first time, I no longer saw the past as a wound, but as a scar, a reminder that I survived. Each step on the snow made a soft crunch, like the beating of a heart. Not heavy, not hurried. Only a simple steadiness, the thing I had been seeking for so long. When I returned to Miller's Market, the afternoon had turned golden. Sunlight slanted through the panes, shining over hundreds of handmade goods, jars of jam, baskets of flowers, bread, and the smiles that were real. I walked the aisle, greeting everyone, listening to children laugh. A young employee ran up. Miss Grace, someone just told your story on the radio. They said you're a winner who didn't need revenge. I smiled and answered gently. People only truly win when they no longer need to be above anyone at all. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind alone. I stood in the empty market, looking up at the wooden sign above. Miller's Market, where peace is the real prize. The yellow lights reflected on the word peace, making it glow. I placed my hand over my heart and felt its steady rhythm. No heaviness, no tears. Only a tender quiet I once thought I'd never have again. That night, I opened my old journal, its pages yellowed. I wrote the final line, my handwriting slightly trembling. He took everything from me in silence. I reclaimed it with peace. And in the end, peace was louder than revenge. I closed the journal and looked out the window. Outside, snow was still falling, blanketing the city in white. I smiled. Not out of happiness, but out of peace. The thing I spent my youth to understand. The next morning, when I opened Miller's Market, an elderly woman walked in carrying a small bouquet. She said, You must be Grace Miller? Thank you for this place. It makes me believe that no matter how badly we're hurt, people can live well again. I took her hand and smiled. No one is beyond beginning again, ma'am. All they need to do is choose. Peace. Sunlight shone under the eaves, spilling across my face. I looked around. The stalls, the voices, the light, the smell of coffee. all blending into a gentle song. And I understood. This was the final chapter of the old life, and the first chapter of the life I truly owned. Perhaps true revenge isn't about making someone fall, but about standing up again yourself, in peace. Grace had walked through it all: betrayal, loss, loneliness, and those nights when her own breathing was the only sound keeping her company. But she didn't choose hatred. She chose forgiveness. Because some wounds only heal when we stop tearing them open to prove we were once in pain. This story isn't about the man who lost everything. It's about the woman who dared to step out of the dark, who refused to let pain define the rest of her life. Sometimes life gives us a ticket, not to trade for money, but for a chance to begin again, with a heart that has finally grown up. If it were you, standing where Grace stood, would you choose to forgive? Would you stay silent for peace, or speak up to let justice burn bright? Tell me in the comments, because perhaps your answer will be the next chapter of this story.